But first, we begin with Missouri's own Drew Lock and his situation with the Denver Broncos. And this can go without saying, really, but I believe his slide in the draft that we saw was pretty inexcusable, in my opinion. Drew got the higher upside, arguably, than any other quarterback in this draft. And it seems to me like those who take risks at the quarterback position, those are the teams that get rewarded time and time again with awesome quarterback play. Teams who have great quarterbacks in this league are generally the teams that picked the player with the higher upside over the safer pick. And it dawned on me that, man, a lot of teams in this league who go for the guy with the high ceiling, go for the guy who's maybe not a surefire, solid quarterback, go for the guy with higher upside. Those are the teams that get rewarded. Those are the quarterbacks we end up talking about. And I'll give you a few examples. The Bears is where I'm going to start. 2 years ago, could have taken Patrick Mahomes. They could have taken Deshaun Watson. But the first quarterback off the board was Mitchell Trubisky, a guy with a very low ceiling, a guy who, he maybe was more of a sure thing than Patrick Mahomes. It's tough to say that now, considering he's the second best or the best quarterback in the league, but he was more of a sure thing than Patrick Mahomes coming out of college. Maybe even Deshaun Watson also. But he unarguably has a lower ceiling than those two guys. Moving back a draft year, the Rams could have taken Carson Wentz. And yes, Jared Goff is good, and I like him despite his poor Super Bowl performance. But between those two, I mean, come on, who's the one that we talk about all the time? Between Carson Wentz and Jared Goff. Carson Wentz was a no-name guy out of North Dakota State. Wasn't high on a lot of people's boards, but talk about somebody getting their guy. Last week we talked about teams getting their guy. The Eagles went for their guy, and they got rewarded richly, trading into the second overall pick. Carson Wentz was the guy who was way higher ceiling, but obviously less of a sure thing. And in contrast, let me give you an example of a team that reached for a quarterback and got one. Cleveland could have taken Josh Rosen or Sam Darnold, but they went risky, and they chose a guy with perhaps the highest upside and convinced themselves they could make it work in Baker Mayfield. Now, I'm not against picking quality quarterbacks. That's not what I'm trying to say. And what we saw last draft, was a team going safe, and that was the New York Giants. And with all that being said, again, I'm not bashing the Giants. If they like their guy, if they like Daniel Jones, well, that's great. If Daniel Jones is a tier 2 or 3 quarterback, I can't knock that pick. But who I'm actually ripping, before we get into Drew Lock specifically, the Dolphins and the Bengals. I mean, I'm serious. 2 teams, one of which doesn't even have a quarterback, passing on Haskins and Lock. These 2 guys are the 2 guys who have the higher upsides, in my opinion, than Kyler Murray. Haskins and Lock are the guys with crazy high ceilings. And yes, will Kyler be better than one of them, or maybe even both of them? I could see a world where that exists. But Lock and Haskins can both throw the ball as good as anybody in almost any draft that we've seen recently. Talents like that don't come around every single draft. And if you're trying to find the next Patrick Mahomes, which it seems like everybody is, or everybody should be, I mean, take a swing at one of those 2.
Yeah, because if you're taking a swing more or less at a guy that you just know is going to be okay, I'd say drafting Daniel Jones was a swing. Just because, I mean, well, you have to go get your guy, and you have to make an effort to actually get him, and they did that. But I mean, if there's guys with higher upside, I also don't understand why you don't take them if you're willing to commit to a long process of grooming a quarterback in the hopes of him being good later. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, when the more I think about the Giants situation, the more arrows point to drafting somebody with risk, right? Because Eli Manning, I mean, everybody on the outside of New York media and New York fandom probably thinks that Eli should retire. That being said, he probably has a couple more years at the very most in him. And so take somebody with high upside who can be groomed, like you said, and be taught the game by a 2-time Super Bowl MVP, Eli Manning. Right? Don't take somebody who has an incredibly low ceiling like Daniel Jones. I mean, that's the risk that you need to take. And like I said at the very beginning, there's a decision that teams make. Either draft the guy with higher upside or draft the guy who's a more surefire thing. But what's curious about Daniel Jones is I haven't even heard that he is a surefire thing. I just know that Haskins and Locke's upsides are way higher than Jones. The Giants just must have really liked him. And teams are always trying to find the next this, next that, right? Drew Brees was great. We saw an influx of short quarterbacks in this league, right? Russell Wilson. Everyone's trying to find the next Russell Wilson. Maybe everyone's going to try to find the next either Patrick Mahomes or Michael Vick or something with these Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson quarterbacks circulating in the NFL, right? If you're trying to find the next great thing, the current great thing's Pat Mahomes. The current great thing's Sean McVay. And if you're trying to find the next one of them, Haskins and Locke exist in this world. They have the exact same skill sets, right? That they are athletic but don't rely on their mobility, and they have complete rocket arms. Those two things don't come around that often in this league. And it's shocking to me that the Dolphins, who went for a guy, Rosen, who in my opinion has a very low ceiling, and we'll get back to that, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars are a team that for some reason is content with Nick Foles and nothing but Nick Foles. They didn't even draft a backup quarterback.
Well, they paid him so much money. I feel like that's okay because if you give him, I think he's getting $30 million a year, then you have to commit to him being your quarterback at least one of those years and give him a chance.
Right, but I believe that Jacksonville passed on Drew Lock twice. I think they had a second-round pick before Denver had their 2 second-round picks. And so if Nick Foles is going to be your quarterback for the next 2 years, well, then that's fine, and you can commit to that. And that's actually not a bad commitment to make. I don't think Nick Foles is, anything worse than about the 20th best quarterback in the NFL. And so that's a good commitment to make. And then when he's terrible, switched over to Locke, another great prospect. But maybe the Jags were specifically staying away from Missouri because Blaine Gabbert didn't work. Right?
Honestly, maybe. Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. Just like how Houston stayed away from Derek Carr because David Carr didn't work. That was a poor decision. Maybe the Jags are staying away from Drew because of Blaine. But I'm going to ask us a question regarding Drew. Is Locke better for Denver, or is Denver better for Locke? And another way to ask that question is, did Denver steal a great quarterback in the second round who could have succeeded anywhere? Or is Denver the perfect system, a dream come true, a best case scenario for Drew Lock? And I'm going to answer this question up front. I'm willing to bet on the former. I think Denver's pretty lucky here. I think Denver's very lucky that he was around in about the middle of the second round. Now, that being said, Denver is the best fit for Drew, the perfect fit for Drew, and his situation couldn't be better from a quarterback standpoint. And even though Jacksonville, Miami, and I would even argue Cincinnati should have taken Drew Lock, I mean, he's one lucky dude to be wearing a Denver cap come draft night, not a Cincinnati hat, not a Miami hat, or a Jacksonville hat.
All of those places you named, though, I think he'd have a similar situation where he sits for at least a year. I don't think there was any team that was going to immediately pick Drew Lock and start him. So I also think, it's the former, like you said. He was going to be good anywhere as long as he was given time. That's my only qualifier. And Denver's going to do that. So I think it's maybe a little bit of a good match as well, but mostly just the fact that no one picked Drew Lock. Well, there were 40 picks went before him, Yeah,
I'd be willing to bet that it's a mixture of both. I do think Lock's going to be good anywhere, but let's think about this. What quarterback would have been teaching Drew Lock the NFL game, how to be an NFL quarterback? At Jacksonville, he would have been sitting behind Nick Foles. That's not the worst guy in the world to be pumping knowledge into you. Ryan Fitzpatrick would have been teaching Drew Lock the game at Miami, right? That's not great. You can't teach what Fitzpatrick knows.
Harvard grad.
Right, but he could teach him calculus.
Yeah.
But he can't teach him how to be a great quarterback. Fitzpatrick can't even teach himself how to be a great quarterback. It just happens twice or three times in his career. Drew Lock would have been learning behind Fitzpatrick. And then Cincinnati, Drew Lock would have been learning behind Andy Dalton. He would have been learning how to be a mediocre quarterback in this league for 12 years, right? That's not exactly who you want to be learning under. But now he's learning under Joe Flacco, who, depending on who you ask, is either elite or not. I believe he's not elite. That being said, it's not like he's horrible. He's probably the best quarterback of the guys I've named to learn under, right? The tutelage of Joe Flacco is probably pretty good. He taught Lamar Jackson how to win football games in Baltimore before they shipped him off. But Jacksonville, Miami, Cincinnati, three teams that it should have taken Lock, in my opinion. Those three teams are poorly ran teams. And it's lucky Drew is not wearing any of those colors come today. The Nick Foles sign, again, I believe was terrible for the Jags. They're headed into NFL purgatory, in my opinion. And instead of going full tank mode and starting Cody Kessler and getting a top 5 pick next year, they're going to go 7-9. They're going to get the 12th overall pick and perhaps 0 high-quality quarterbacks. Right? My NFL purgatory is where you don't want to be. Jacksonville's headed there. Miami is already there. And Josh Rosen is probably not going to be enough to get them over the 500 hump. If you finish 7-9 and 8-8, that's not where you want to be for 6 years in a row. And that's where Miami already is. A crawl space has a higher ceiling, I believe, than Josh Rosen. Right? I think they should have stuck with him in Arizona, but I'm not in love with Josh Rosen from a standpoint that, wow, this is a great franchise quarterback. My argument was see it out. Not that he's not put all the eggs in one Josh Rosen basket, but you got to at least see it out. And Drew Lock can be better than Andy Dalton, and now would have been the time to draft a successor to Andy Dalton when he's got about 3 years left. I mean, again, not many quarterback draft classes do we see two guys with unbelievably strong arms, right? Unbelievably strong arms. And Denver decided to roll the dice and wait until the second round to draft Drew Lock. They were incredibly lucky that he was there because I would have drafted him. First of all, I would have been drafting him if I was Oakland with two of those late firsts that they had. I would have drafted him with Cincinnati, with Jacksonville's first or second round pick. I would have drafted him in Carolina's second round pick. They ended up taking Will Grier later in the draft. So quarterback was a need on their draft board. They just decided not to take one high. I would have drafted him if I was Cincinnati, Miami, Jacksonville.
I thought New England was going to draft him.
That would have been another great pick. New England with the 32nd pick, the last pick of the entire draft. That would have been a really good pick. And they took quarterback as well. They took Jared Stidham late in the draft. That's a really good fit. And so Denver is luckier to have Lock, in my opinion, than Lock is to have Denver. That being said, Denver did draft offensive line and tight end in the first round. So his situation in Denver's perfect, right? Denver plays most of their games in cold weather, home and road, unless they're playing in LA. And so you need a strong arm quarterback there. It helps that whoever's teaching Drew Lock the game has the exact same skill sets as Drew Lock, that being Joe Flacco. And so this is all coming together, which is great for us Missouri fans, right? This all looks awesome. It looks like both the husband and wife in this situation are parties that are made for each other, really. I mean, John Elway, he's like what you want strong arm quarterbacks in this league to turn into. And he's running this team. This is all too perfect for Drew Lock right now. I mean, I can't even imagine how he feels thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to Jacksonville. Oh my gosh, I'm going to Cincinnati. Oh no, I'm going to Miami. Oh man, I don't want to go to these places. And then Denver's the team that picks you. I mean, just unbelievable. I'm so happy for him. I think he would have succeeded anywhere, but Denver, this is the perfect situation for not only Drew, but for Denver also. Switching gears, we're talking the NBA on the other side of this break. Stay with us. It's The Cast.